In this video, we're going to talk about graphing polar curves parametrically and then determining how those relate to polar curves. So before we do that, I want to go ahead and just give you the definition of how to graph a polar function parametrically. So the polar graph r equals f of theta, where r is an equation of theta, is the curve defined parametrically as x equals r cosine theta and y equals r sine theta. So that means that x is also equal to whatever the equation is in terms of theta times cosine, and then whatever the equation is times sine would be the y value. So the first one I want you to go ahead and graph on your calculator is x equals sine of 6t cosine t and y equals sine of 6t sine of t. And I want you to tell me what polar function do you think this matches with. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and graph that. Alright, so if I go ahead and graph that parametric equation, I get this flower curve. So this should look like a polar function that we've done in a previous example. So let's go ahead and see if that looks like our r is equal to our formula there. So r is equal to, and it looks like we should have sine of 6 and then theta. And when I go ahead and graph that and I turn on and off each one, I can see that they're exactly the same curve. So then the polar version of this curve is just r equals this equation. But if you want to write them parametrically, it's r cosine for x and r sine for y. So again, that is the polar curve if you want to graph it parametrically. So the next one I want you to go ahead and graph is this one. X equals 1 minus 2 cosine times cosine, and y equals 1 minus 2 cosine times sine. And I want you to tell me what graph that looks like. So according to the previous explanation, this should be equal to r is equal to 1 minus 2 cosine of theta. And that's exactly what we get here, which was like our example from example 3. All right, let's try one more. X equals 4 sine times cosine, and y equals 4 sine times sine. And this beginning part is going to be r. So our polar should be r is equal to 4 sine of t. And if you go ahead and graph both of those, you should get the same graph, which looks something like this.